for jumping on the mayor's desk from 30,000 years ago. And people don't pay attention to what I said after that. I said, the rent's too high, the gang banging has to stop, and the poverty is uncontrollable. Till this day, those same problems still exist. That's why number 5 is to receive recommendations from you, the people, on how to prevent Stefan's, so on and so forth, from ever happening again. Because it's a huge issue. And number 6 of our SAC6, the last and final, is spread the gospel of love. I believe John 15:12 says, love each other as I've loved you. That's God says that's my greatest commandment. And if you skip down to John 15:18, he says, if the world hates you, know they hated me long before they ever hated you. So we believe in spreading the gospel of love, which is everybody, love everybody.
Doing a lot of different things, but in the past 4 years or so, I've been working on state level reparations stuff. And what I'm going to do, probably within about 10 or 15 minutes tops, maybe 20 minutes tops, is give you a basic understanding of what's going on here at the state level as it relates to California reparations. And then I'm going to answer every single question I can from you. Okay? I'm trying to do all of that in about an hour or so, but the first part will be in about 15, 20 minutes. So, before I do any of that though, I'll talk a little bit about who we are at the coalition, and then I want to talk about where we are as a people, as it relates to reparations specifically, and then I'm going to give you the basics about California reparations. So, the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, we started doing reparations work here in the state in about 2019. In 2019, we actually started talking to state government people, state politicians, people about reparations, and one of the people that we started talking to was then Assembly Member Dr. Shirley Weber, now California Secretary of State Dr. Shirley Weber. And Dr. Shirley Weber at that time told us that she and her team, specifically folks in our office like Maureen Simmons, were writing or getting ready to write a state reparations task force bill. So a state bill just to be about creating a state reparations task force. This was in 2019, middle 2019. In 2020, that bill became public. That bill came out. And we actually helped write the final version of that bill. Dr. Weber welcomed us with open arms. She said, whatever ideas y'all got, please do share those ideas. And we shared those ideas with her. She liked a lot of them. Some of them she didn't like. Some of them she did. That's kind of how it works. Sometimes they like some of your stuff. Sometimes they don't. But she welcomed us with open arms and took a lot of the ideas that we had. We then worked to help pass the bill. We then worked to get the governor to sign the bill. In 2020, Governor Gavin Newsom signed something called AB 3121. AB 3121, Assembly Bill 3121, which created California's first in the nation reparations task force. So no other state has something like this. After that, we then worked to help recommend people to the state reparations task force, or for the state reparations task force. So as I'll probably say again in about 10 minutes or so, the law that created the state reparations task force said that there's going to be 9 people that are going to work on reparations for the state. 5 of those people will get picked or would be picked by the governor. 2 of those people will be picked by the leader of the state senate, whose name is still Tony Atkins, and then leader of the state assembly, Anthony Rendon, would pick the other 2. So 2 plus 2 plus 5 is 9. So we worked in 2020 to help recommend people who we thought might be good picks for the state reparations task force. After the state reparations task force started working in 2021, we then started doing, really continued doing community meetings, community town halls, community events, just about California reparations. And in 2022, the state reparations task force selected us as what they call one of 7 community anchor organizations. So these are organizations who they've been working with to go out and do things like this. meaning educate the public, talk about California reparations, get people the information, and help people get involved. So that is part of what we've been doing over the past 2 years, 2 to 3, 4 years really. Our coalition is, as far as we know, the only state organization born just for reparations. I want to say that again. We're the only state organization that we know of so far born just for reparations. We work on reparations and what we call reparative justice, so stuff related to reparations. I'll talk about 2 of those things quickly, and then I want to get right to the reparations here in California. The other thing that we work on that's related to reparations, one of 2 other things, is making sure that our government recognizes those of us who descend from U.S. slavery, those of us whose ancestors actually built this country as a specific group of people. So right now, there's no city you can walk into, there's no county you can walk into, up until, well, starting in 2024, but let's say right now, there's no state you can walk into, no office at any one of those parts of our government you can walk into and say, just tell me how many people here are descendants of U.S. slavery. The government does not collect any information specifically on us as a specific group of people. That's a problem. Crime, really, that's a crime. For the people who built this country, at the very bare minimum, we deserve to be seen as a specific group of people by our government. So last year, we wrote a piece of legislation that the governor actually signed in one of his budget bills that makes California, starting in 2024, the first state to actually start to collect information on those of us who are descendants of U.S. slavery. That's going to start with our state employees first, and then we're going to make sure that it goes out wider to the public after that. So that's the other thing that we work on that's related to reparations. The other thing that we work on that's related to reparations is ending current slavery going on in California. So you can be enslaved in California right now if you are convicted of a crime. Our state constitution, I think it's Article 6 or something like that, I forget the numbers. Some part of our state constitution says something like, neither slavery nor voluntary servitude is allowed in California, comma, except for punishment of a crime. Right now, we have brothers and sisters being forced to work inside of the jails and prisons really. We were very fortunate to meet a young brother named Samuel Nathaniel Brown in 2022. Samuel was serving a 24-to-life sentence. He was working as a custodian, janitor inside of the prisons, and was told after serving almost all of his sentence, after doing hundreds of hours of classes, getting his degrees while he was there, he was told that he had to go and clean up somebody's cell. And in that somebody's cell, the person had been taken out of the cell, they had the coronavirus. And Samuel said, I don't think that's safe for me. I don't really want to do that. I would prefer not to do that. And they told Samuel, if you miss one day of work, when you go for your parole, we're going to violate you on your parole. That means you got to spend another 3 to 15 years here just for not going to work one day. Samuel went back to his cell, called his wife when he could, and said, we got to do something about this. His wife said, write something, let's make something happen. And Samuel from his cell wrote what would become a constitutional amendment to change that part of our state constitution. We worked with Samuel and his team last year on that. We made it through the state assembly. It got to the state senate, and the state senate said no. We don't want to even give the voters of California the choice or the chance to take that out of our state constitution. So we're working now to do this successfully this year through something called the End Slavery in California Act, which was introduced just last month by Assembly Member Lori Wilson out of the Bay Area. So we're going to get this part done this year, this time. It's probably going to happen next year. That's the other thing we work on that's related to reparations. We kind of think that it is hard to talk about doing reparations if you have people still enslaved in our state. So that is what we work on that's related to reparations. Let's get back to reparations, which is why you're here. So I've said the word reparations probably about 20, 30 times already. It's important to understand, and I'm going to do this here now. I'm going to help define the word reparations the way I mean it when I say it, so you have an understanding of what I mean when I say it. Before I do that, though, I want everybody to stop what you're doing, except for the media people, if you can. Stop what you're doing. Hear what I'm about to tell you. We are closer now to reparations than we've ever been. Right now, we are closer to reparations than we've ever been. Each one of you, each one of us, is living, sitting inside of a history book right now. People are already, but will be, talking, reading, writing about what you did, what I did, what we did right now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now. That is partly because California is already the first state to create a reparations task force. There's nothing like this in the country. The national government, the federal government, has been trying to create a reparations commission for about 40 years. For about 40 years, the national government has been trying to pass a law to create something that California did in 2 years. Actually, 1 year. Each one of us is living in history right now. Okay, we can go back to doing what you're doing. So, when I say the word reparations, I think we have a general understanding. So if I ask you what the word reparations mean, you're going to say something like paying a debt, repairing, paying what you owe. All those things are right. When I'm saying the word reparations right now, I want to say in a specific way because it's going to matter to what I say later. So when I say the word reparations, I mean taking action to provide a range of benefits to survivors and descendants of some type of human rights violation. So there was some type of violation, some type of bad thing that happened, and then you take action to provide a range of benefits to the survivors and the descendants of that bad thing that happened. Anywhere you go in the world, reparations has 5 forms. So if you go to parts of Africa, South Africa, if you go to parts of South America, if you go to parts of Europe, anywhere you go in the world, if you go to the United Nations and ask the people who work on reparations at the United Nations, what does reparations mean? What forms does it take? 5 forms. Compensation, restitution, rehabilitation, guarantees of non-repetition, or what I call protections, and something we call satisfaction. Compensation, that's the most easily understandable part. That's the money, that's the checks, that's the guaranteed income. I say it all the time. My team is here. They're going to have to cover their ears. I'm going to say it again. If it don't have compensation, it ain't reparations. Our people work for free for 256 years. We were enslaved in this country longer than we've been free, actually. Right? We were enslaved longer than we've been free. Our people work for free. So if it don't have compensation for that unpaid labor, it ain't reparations. Restitution, what's that? That's the return of land, the return of property, the restoring of you to the best of our ability to a place where you would have been or could have been if the bad thing didn't happen to you in the first place. Rehabilitation, These are what you might think of as the non-financial forms of reparations, so things like free medical services from cradle to the grave, free college, free legal services, things like that. Guarantees of non-repetition, these are what you might think of as the protection, so changing our laws, changing our policies to make sure that the things that happen to us never happen again. And finally, what we think of as satisfaction. So these are what you might think of as the more symbolic forms of reparation, so a public apology from our government. Changing our textbooks to make sure that what actually happened to us is actually told in the textbooks. Things like that. Compensation, plus restitution, plus rehabilitation, plus guarantees of non-repetition, plus satisfaction equals reparations. I'm saying that to you because in the law that created California's Reparations Task Force, the law says somewhere in there that the state of California Reparations Task Force has to create reparations plans in each one of those 5 forms. By law, the state reparations task force is required to create something for reparations in each one of those 5 forms. Okay, why is California even doing this? Wasn't we a free state?
No.
Didn't we come into the union as a free state? The answer is no. There was slavery in California. There were over 1,000 African Americans enslaved in the state of California, brought to California enslaved, many of them, worked the gold mines here in California enslaved. I think we have somebody here who is actually a descendant of someone who was enslaved here in the state of California, sitting here with you right now. So there was slavery here in the state of California. So California is doing this partly because of California's role in slavery and the things that came after slavery, specifically the impact of those things that came after slavery on the descendants of U.S. slavery. Who is getting reparations in California? Who is eligible? Who will be eligible? So in 2022, so last year, the Reparations Task Force in California, I'm going to give you a intro to the State Reparations Task Force too in a few minutes. So, who is eligible for reparations in California? In March of 2022, after about a year or so of public hearings, after about a year or so of discussing, talking about it, thinking about it, asking about it, talking to people about it, the State of California Reparations Task Force said those who would be eligible for reparations in California are those African Americans who are descendants of U.S. slavery. Kind of makes sense. If we're talking about slavery, we're talking about reparations for the descendants of U.S. slavery. In the law that created the State Reparations Task Force, there's something in there that says this is a task force to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans with special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of U.S. slavery. So it's actually in the law. The author of the law actually came to the State Reparations Task Force last year and was asked by the State Reparations Task Force, who did you write this law for? Secretary Weber, she said, I wrote this for those who are descendants of U.S. slavery. So those who have at least one ancestor who was enslaved in this country, by this country. You should also know that by law in California, by law federally, so nationally, by our state constitution, and by our national constitution, we are not allowed to create reparations plans or programs, or any type of government plan or program that does something specifically to hurt one racial group of people, or the other side of that is does something specifically to help one racial group of people. Put your hand up if you heard of something called Prop 209, Proposition 209. Oh, okay, we got some people, good. In the middle 90s, voters in California said, we don't want our government in California doing anything specifically in our government programs to hurt any specific racial group of people, and we don't want our government doing anything specifically to help one racial group of people. So you can imagine how that matters if we're talking about something like reparations So that is partly also why the State Reparations Task Force decided that those who would be eligible have to have at least one ancestor who was enslaved in this country by this country. It's about what we call our lineage. It's about our descendancy from U.S. slavery. If you have at least one ancestor who was enslaved in this country by this country, and now the California Reparations Task Force also decided you also have to be a current California resident, makes sense too, that you would be eligible for reparations in California. Okay. Last couple of minutes here, and I want to take all your questions. So, as I mentioned, in 2020, the governor signed this law. I'm not going to say the name of the law again, but the governor signed a law that created a 9-member group of people, 9-member team, that has 2 years to do 3 things. 2 years to do 3 things. The first thing this 9-member group of people, this 9-member team of people have to do is study reparations with a focus on what California is responsible for. The second thing this 9-member group of people has to do is educate the public. Talk to the people about what it learns. The final thing this reparations task force, this team of people have to do is create an actual reparations plan. That plan is due at the end of their 2-year job. Their 2 years started in June of 2021. That means the end of the 2-year job is June of 2023. So by July 1st of this year, there will be a state reparations plan made public. What happens after the plan comes out? That might be a question coming. What happens? What happens after the plan comes out is that plan then gets sent to the governor, it gets sent to the state senate, it gets sent to the state assembly to put into legislation to become law. The earliest I expect to see any reparations bills or legislation moving through the state government is sometime this time next year. So early next year, I expect to see a state of California Reparations Task Force bill with how much compensation we getting in it, how much land and restitution we getting in it, how much rehabilitation services we getting in it, how much the laws and policies going to change to protect us is in it, and how much satisfaction is in it. The earliest I expect to see that moving its way to become a law is this time next year. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. Questions?